10 torture words. 10 torture words. How the founding fathers tried to protect religion in America and what's happened since. Stephen Mansfield. That which fathers bequeath thee, earn it anew if thou wouldst possess it. A Celtic maxim. Introduction. These were the first 10 words of the American Bill of Rights, and they are a miracle of history. For the first time in human experience, the legislative power of a nation was forbidden from legislating conscience of man. There would be no establishment of religion, no state church or official religion. Faith would be celebrated but not commanded. Worship would be protected but not prescribed. The fathers have guaranteed it with a second phrase they added to these historic first 10 words. Not only would Congress make no law respecting an establishment of religion, but it would also never prohibit the free exercise thereof. Together the 16 words stood guard on the ramparts of the new nation against the tyrannical tendencies of the centuries. And religion thrived. The institutions of faith multiplied. Religious revivals transformed whole communities, and immigrant faiths were welcomed, though not always without initial challenge. The elected representatives of the people, recognizing that religion was essential to the brand of national character that allowed free institutions to flourish, fanned the flames of faith. The People's Congress ordered the printing of Bibles, called for days of prayer and fasting, positioned chaplains in the armed services as well as in its own assemblies, funded missionaries to the natives of the land, even sponsored church services and government buildings, as we shall see. It was not paradise, but it was an attempt on the part of the national government to encourage religion in general without demanding religion in particular. Meanwhile, the individual states that had created this federal government were permitted to be religious as they wanted to be. They were, after all, close to the people. They were local and ethnic, and near their constitutions could honor whatever faith the people held dear, and their schools could require competence in whatever truths the people wished to pass on to the next generation. It was the National Congress that had been addressed in the 10 historic words, because everyone understood that this National Congress had to be bound tight against the expansive arrogance of political power. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. States could do as they pleased because their citizens could always vote a change or move elsewhere in the country. There was no escaping the reach of the National Congress, though. So it was in America, and not just at the dawn of a nation's life. For 150 years, this delicate religious balance prevailed. There would be no national church, but there would be national encouragement of faith. There would be no official religion, but the states could nurture as a vibrant faith as possible people wished. So solid did this arrangement, so clear this vision of religion and government, that the Supreme Court was not even called upon to issue a ruling directly related to it until after World War II, more than a century and a half after the defining words were first penned. Yet the ruling was a disaster. In 1947, the majority opinion case called Everson v. Board of Education dismantled the wise configuration of the American Fathers and erected instead a confusing and nearly unenforceable mishmash of prohibitions. The Supreme Court forbade the federal government from passing laws that aid religion using tax money in any amount to support religion or religious institutions. It was a break from history, a break from the plain sense of the 10 noble words, and for the reason to be discussed later in these pages, it was a prohibition that applied not only to the federal government, but to the states as well. To justify the rejection of American fathers' design, the Supreme Court cited the words of a letter written by Thomas Jefferson and concluded that the intent of the first 10 words of the First Amendment was to erect a wall of separation between church and state. It did not matter that Thomas Jefferson wrote this letter some 14 years after the First Amendment became law. It did not matter that Thomas Jefferson was not even in the country during the convention that drafted the First Amendment, nor did it matter that Jefferson's words were used in a manner that Jefferson himself would not have approved. What did seem to matter was that a new secular vision for the nation, one that was far removed from anything the founding generation had envisioned. The dismantling of heritage thus began, with the Supreme Court forbidding government to touch religion in any way. An entire industry of litigation was born. During the following decades, there were lawsuits to chisel religious phrases from official buildings, strip the Ten Commandments from schools to government buildings, quash prayer in any form at any governmentally connected event, and religious instruction in public schools, banish religious symbols from the state or federal land, remove chaplains from legislatures and the armed services, and even keep religion from playing a role in the rehabilitation of criminals. It grew worse. In the secularist climate of the Everson aftermath, a young senator from Texas decided that he'd endured enough political opposition from religious organizations. These faith-based groups persisted in exposing his corruption and pointing out abuses in the election that had landed him in office. So in 1954, Senator Lyndon Johnson proposed an amendment to the tax code that would silence the political speech of religious tax-exempt organizations. Now not only was the government kept from supporting religion, but religion was kept from speaking its wisdom into the process of government. To preserve this secular vision, new organizations arose such as People for the American Way, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. Even the American Civil Liberties Union, from time to time, valiant defender of traditional liberties, turned its energies toward banning the vestiges in traditional religion in American public life, and the efforts of these organizations were richly rewarded, though largely the perversion of an otherwise benevolent law. In 1976, the courts began ruling the victims of civil rights abuse could have their legal fees paid if they were victorious in lawsuits to reclaim what had been taken from them. These rulings were designed, for example, to encourage a black man in Alabama to stand up against employment discrimination without fear of losing his life savings. In the process, it was a noble pillar in the Templar of American civil rights, but in the time the courts began applying the law to religion cases and allowing third parties to benefit. This meant that the ACLU might file a lawsuit to have cross removed from the state park, and the courts could not only force the state to remove the cross, but also force it to pay the ACLU legal fees, with incentives such as secularizing America became a profit-making venture. Intimidation quickly became the tactic of choice. A school district might permit a Bible study to meet on school property before class hours. This would offend the ACLU, which in turn contact the district to threaten a lawsuit. It would only require a threat. The financially strapped school district knew it had not have the resources for a protected legal war. Moreover, the ACLU could make sure that the school district understood that a loss in the court would mean paying both its own and the ACLU legal expenses. It was too great a risk. The school district would ban the Bible study without putting up a fight, and the ACLU would emerge victorious through sheer intimidation. It was faith-based blackmail at its best. It was also the state-funded dismantling of a centuries-old heritage of faith. This, then, is the post-Everson world we live in today. It is present climate. A single atheist files a suit to remove the name of God from the Pledge of Allegiance. A court hears arguments as to whether a cross on the Los Angeles County seal is a violation of law of the land. Military chaplains are sometimes forbidden to pray in the name of the very God whom they sworn to serve in arms. And when Muslims in Florida school district asked to be released from the classes a few days a year to practice their faith, that school district is terrified. It bans all religious holidays in fear of a legal bombardment. All of this is based on 10 now tortured words. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. As the average American looks on, he is hardly surprised. He has been schooled to believe that law is plaything among lawyers. This is what the O.J. Simpson debacle, political scandals in Washington, D.C., and the courtroom antics of celebrity trials have taught him. He laughs with pained understanding at the latest lawyer joke and is knowingly amused when a commentator on television quotes the centuries-old line from Shakespeare, King Henry. The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. The American might have felt differently. He remembers the pride he felt those years ago in elementary school when he quoted the preamble to the Constitution for the school play. He sensed that the words were holy, not in a divine sense, but in the way that people make something holy by their reverence. Later in high school, he wrote a paper on electoral college and marveled at the wisdom of those founding minds 2 centuries before. But that has faded. Though if that he is average among his countrymen, he believes in God, prays regularly, and wants his leaders to be moral, even righteous people. He does not expect a constitution that rules his land to preserve anything of a noble heritage. Law is what judges. Say it is, he believes. If statistics are true, he is more likely to know the names of the cartoon characters in the hit television show The Simpsons than he is to know the 5 rights guaranteed to him in the First Amendment. Here, then, is where our average American might have lived out his days, in the litigious, cynical vacuum of a vanishing public religion. But then something remarkable happened. Religion once again moved center stage in American culture. It is difficult to say exactly when this began. Perhaps it was transforming experience of September 11, 2001. Perhaps it was the spiritual hunger of the baby boomers and their children, the millennials, together nearly 200 million strong, that dragged the nation in tow toward reconsideration of spirituality. Or perhaps it was the religious re-examination forced by the American experience at war and the reality of the nation's greatest enemy in the world was a religious network violently making a moral spiritual case against the West and against the United States in particular. Whatever the cause, this religious awakening has become one of the most defining hallmarks of recent American history, and it is forcing a reconsideration of the role in religion in American national life, and thus of the meaning of those 10 tortured words. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. Was this single sentence really designed to banish faith from the American public square? Did the founding generation really intend a secular state, or did they intend a religious society encouraged by the state, unhindered by the state? Has the Everson legacy robbed the nation of the religious wisdom of the founding fathers at a time when she is in desperate need of it? At a time when faith is reclaiming a defining role as the center of American culture? The present American moment, when a religiously inspired global war, a religious-inspired president, an increasingly religious population, and religious-inflamed politics all shape the national experience, seems a perfect moment for the reconsideration of religious heritage and of the laws that have banished the wisdom of that heritage from our public life. The truth is that the 60-year legacy of the Supreme Court's Everson decision has tortured the intent of the revolution is well underway. Of the founding generation, tortured the vital role of religion and its civil society, and tortured the emergent faith that now offers an American resistance. Perhaps this present American moment gives us opportunity to grant the next generation a greater legacy than we have received. 1. What the fathers founded. The revolution is well underway, and the people rejoice. Liberty is the cry heard on the streets, and with every blow against the king, with every stab at the old order, the electric sense of the new age dawning fills the already charged air.